powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, this is Football at 4.
Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill, along with Ryan Rothstein here on 97.3 ESPN. Of course, Football at 4 being brought to you by the Gallery Bar Booking Games and Ocean Casino Resort. Go to the Gallery, go to Ocean, go for the win. For more info, visit oceanac.com. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Geoff Mosher is back on a Wednesday as we finally have some tangible answers about the Eagles roster. Basically, the last 24 plus hours have been a lot of, minutia. And Jeff, as I said yesterday to Adam Kaplan, yesterday was the beta version of the Eagles roster. And today we got a lot more clarity. Have you come down from your head spinning after the 12 o'clock waiver wire, Geoff Mosher?
Yeah, Josh, our heads weren't spinning that much. There weren't a ton of moves that were, so surprising, except for the fact that it was more about numbers than players, right? There was no one single player that they waived that you said, man, I can't believe he's gone. But then you looked and saw, no punter, no punt returner, no backup center, only 3 inside linebackers. And obviously, when you heard Howie speak, and this goes back to last year a little bit, Josh, and I think Howie's doing a really good job of looking at the team from a vantage point of, I have 69 guys to use, not 53.
Yep.
Because he has well manipulated the practice squad changes over the last few years that allow you to elevate players, elevate veterans, have veterans on the practice squad that in the past you couldn't have.
Let's touch on that really quick because, Jeff, explain to folks out there, because we were trying to explain earlier before you came on about how in today's NFL, the 53-man roster is not the end-all, be-all. And as you mentioned, Roseman said yesterday, we look at 69 guys. So talk about the rules, like how many guys can you call up on game day? And I believe it's only like 3 or 4 call-ups before the guy has to join the roster, correct?
Right. So what it is you can elevate, a team can elevate a player on the practice squad 3 times in a given season. And you can do that for up to 3 players on any given week. So theoretically, hypothetically, they could go into week 1. They don't have to have Aaron Sipos on their 53-man. They don't have to have a backup center on their 53-man. And they don't have to have a punt returner on their 53-man. They could elevate Sipos to be their punter. They could elevate Devin Allen or Britton Covey to be their punt returner. And they could elevate Julian Good-Jones, who came back, an offensive lineman who has snapping experience, as their backup center. Now, remember, you have to also you only get a certain amount of guys that you're allowed to have active on game day, even with the call-ups. But you're probably going to see guys who are on the 53 deactive or inactive for the game, guys like Kelly Ringo. One of Eli Ricks and Mario Goodrich, right, are probably not going to be active. So that's 2 guys right there. And then probably one of those 7 defensive tackles, maybe 2, maybe Moro Ajomo and somebody else,
right? So
that you can have these elevations and the other guys that you need.
Yeah, it's wild because in today's NFL, you're using roster spots to protect guys from the waiver wire, and you're using the practice squad for quote-unquote essentials. Like, for example, we all know that, Aaron Sipos may not be on the 53-man, but barring something changing, he's going to be there week 1 punting for you. So he's already one guy you're calling up. You started the roster with only 4 wide receivers. Well, now you got, 4 more on the practice squad. So obviously the Eagles' strategy, Jeff, is we're using the practice squad to fill our needs, and we're using the roster to protect guys that we don't want to lose.
Correct. That's absolutely it. Ordinarily, if this were prior to COVID, because COVID is what changed the practice squad rules,
right?
To be honest with you. Prior to COVID, the Eagles almost assuredly, with the old rules, would have kept Aaron Sipos, right? Would have kept fewer defensive tackles, so they probably would have released a guy like Moro Ajomo, probably would have had to release a guy like Ricks or Mario Goodrich, if not both of them, right? And probably would have definitely kept a punt returner on the team, a definite punt returner. And now you look at it, Josh, and with the return of Devin Allen, Greg Ward, and Britton Covey to the practice squad, hypothetically, they could go 9 weeks of just using, right, a practice squad punt returner. I don't think they want to do that. And you and I both know, and everybody listening knows, that injuries, guys go on IR, it opens up roster spots. So eventually guys like Sipos or somebody else will be able to be on the 53-man because of injuries that open up spots. But for the time being, you want to keep your young developmental talent. This is the way to do it. It buys you more time to get evaluation on them. And also, Josh, what it really does is 3 or 4 weeks from now, you may then want to say, okay, I'm comfortable waiving Eli Ricks or Mario Goodrich because I know they'll get back to my practice squad, because I know every other team right now isn't scouring the waiver wire the way they were 3 weeks ago at the cutdown date. Right now, everybody's trying to get their 53s and their practice squads set. And once they do, they don't focus as much, or they don't prioritize as much as some of the guys they may have wanted at the deadline. So it's easier to get guys back to your practice squad in 3 or 4 weeks.
Talk with Geoff Mosher at Geoff P. Mosher on Twitter, joining us here at Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, InsideTheBirds.com. Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill here on Hump Day Wednesday on 97.3 ESPN. Jeff, something I want to touch on as well, because you mentioned it Monday. Adam Kaplan mentioned it yesterday about special teams. And I don't think it's a coincidence that some of these guys who are on the practice squad are probably, not just Sipos, but others are probably going to be a part of maybe the game day plan for special teams, whether it is a Ben Van Sumeren or a Devin Allen, Britton Covey, Mekhi Gardner, any of those guys, even a Tristan McCollum maybe. I foresee some of these guys being called up literally because they have a role on special teams, it looks like.
Yeah, that's what I was sort of referring to, right, with you can get 9 weeks of punt returners out of Allen, Ward, and Britton Covey, which, again, I don't think they're likely to do. It's just something they could do. And
you never put it past Howie Roseman to do something crazy. So
of course not, right. And Van Sumeren's a good one because they really only have three. They have 3 inside linebackers on the roster, right? They have Zach Cunningham, Nakobe Dean, and Christian Ellis. So that really only gives them Christian Ellis to use on special teams. I don't think that they want to, all of that takes is one injury to a starting linebacker, and Ellis then gets in, and then you're screwed about having a guy for special teams there. So I would agree with you that Van Sumeren is a guy to watch for, to be elevated at certain points of the year, and probably get on the 53 sooner than later because of that, because they're just not going to have 3 inside linebackers. You just cannot. I get it that the Eagles devalue inside linebacker. That's fine. That's understandable. But much like Punter, you're not going to have just 3 inside linebackers on your 53 all year long.
Jeff, when you also talk about the roster, I want to ask you about the situation in the secondary, because it's interesting. Kevon Wallace, he's not just not here. He's gone. He got claimed by the Cardinals. So you're down to the 4 safeties that you have. You started the initial 53 with, 6-7 corners, basically, and you have more corners on the practice squad. So is any of that a potential sign to you that we could see more moves being made before September 10th? They might make more moves, considering they put Gardner and McCollum both on the practice squad, that maybe one of the guys who made the 53 might not be there week 1.
Yeah, that's a potential. I just think in general, we call the first 53 on Tuesday at 4:00 the initial 53, the fluid 53. Again, I look and say you have 7 interior defensive linemen. You can't play 7 interior defensive linemen. So there's no reason to have 7 on your 53-man roster, right? So is a move coming there? I think the Derek Barnett situation is still fluid, I would say, because he's a guy who he himself would probably rather play more than 12 snaps a game, and the Eagles can't probably promise him more than that. But I don't know that they want to pay his salary for just to play 12 to 15 snaps a game. They love pass rushers, but it's not like he's been a great pass rusher. They're sort of overpaying him for the role that he's going to be playing for the Eagles. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was some ability to move him if they could. And so that's why the next 24, 48 hours, and like you said, all the way up to the season opener, anything. Some guy can get hurt in practice in 4 days, right? And then all of a sudden they're calling up the Eagles saying, hey, we'd like your X player or so-and-so, and the move could be made.
I got to ask you about the punter, because this is the one area I mentioned to Ryan earlier, Geoff, and I'll mention it to you. Aaron Sipos is not a good NFL punter. He's just not. Every number suggests that he's not even an average NFL punter. Like, he's below average the rest of the league. But Howie and Nick Sirianni, when they spoke to the media yesterday, they made it sound pretty clear that, they're content with him. And guess what? Thomas Morstead was put on waivers by the Jets. They could have put a claim on him, and they didn't. So do you have any explanation why the Eagles are so, for lack of a better term, content with a below-average NFL punter?
Well, I think content's a good word. I don't think they're happy. I think content is about all they've got on Aaron Sipos. Do remember this about Aaron. He does a good job holding on field goals. And while that might seem trivial for some, remember what life was like for Jake Elliott when Cam Johnston was the punter and holder. It was not great for Jake Elliott. If you remember, he had a real regression after that nice year. And then once Aaron Sipos came in, he stabilized that, I don't know if you want to call it a battery, right? That triangle from long snapper to holder to kick. He stabilized it, and Jake Elliott has been magnificent for the last few years. So you can't understate that there's a rhythm and a symmetry. Now, it doesn't mean you can't upgrade your punter. I mean, you've got to at least try, and they did sign Tyler Zentner to give him an opportunity. He didn't do any better. I don't know how good of a holder Thomas Morstead is. He has been in the league for a long time. Maybe the Eagles just did not want to use a waiver claim on Morstead, knowing that somebody in the next 2 days might get put on waivers that they like, specifically at certain positions like linebacker, right, or safety. So because punting is fungible, I imagine that they're going to hold on to that waiver claim that they've got. Not that it's the highest waiver claim in the world, but, just still the ability to have it there. And I would just think that if they're going to bring in a punter upgrade, they'll sign – they're going to bring somebody to work out, Josh. Probably today's Wednesday? Probably today. Today's a big workout day. So I'm guessing today that there were punters at the NovaCare complex, and, they'll make a decision going forward from there. When you waive a guy, you got to claim his contract. I don't know what Thomas Morstead contract was, but
True.
I think the Eagles don't want to have to be locked into some kind of salary on a punter.
Yeah, it's just, my thinking was we saw the Broncos and the Browns both trade for kickers. So my in the back of my mind, there was a part of me that, Howie Roseman. I mean, you covered the Eagles long enough, Geoff. I mean, you've seen Howie Roseman make all kinds of weird. I mean, the trade yesterday came out of nowhere for Albert O, for goodness sake. I mean, no one saw that guy getting traded for him. And that guy was supposed to be the replacement for Noah Fant in Denver, and now he's in an Eagles uniform, and the Eagles still brought Brady Russell back to the practice squad. So, I mean, it's, this team does things that we don't always foresee. So I guess it made too much sense to me to be like, maybe they'll go get a punter. Maybe I was just being too hopeful, I should say, because I got to tell you, Geoff, I keep telling people the reason why I keep bringing up the punter is because if you made a list of the top 5 reasons why the Eagles lost the biggest game of the year, that thing called the Super Bowl, Aaron Sipos, to me, is on that list. He is.
100%. No doubt about it. And I think that's why he's not on the 53, Josh. I would agree with you on that. And I'd be sort of stunned if he wound up being the punter for the entire year. We're just going to have to see what kind of – obviously the Eagles got to find somebody that they deem better and sort of their vetting has to be a little bit better. Last year, they signed Brett Kern. He had been a Pro Bowler, lost out in Tennessee to the rookie who has a cannon leg. I think his last name is Stonehouse. I can't remember. Ryan Stonehouse, I think, the Titans punter. I forget his name, but, it was basically a case of Kern losing out. He's a little to the younger guy. He came here, and he had dead leg. He couldn't punt. He was not the guy they thought. And so I'm sure they're going to make sure, because they have the time to do it, that they're going to work out a lot of guys and make sure they get the right guy.
I want to get your follow-up from you on Albert Okwuegbunam, because this is a guy who,
Well done.
What's that?
Well done on that.
Well, I listened to Adam say it twice yesterday, so I just tried to replicate what he said. So
that's funny because I listened to Adam say it twice and decided I was just going to say Albert O going on. That's what he's known as, Albert O. So you and I went opposite directions with that.
Well, still, I want to ask you about him because of this. The Eagles now have 4 tight ends currently on the current version of the 53. What do you think the reasoning is for it to have 4 tight ends? Because that in and of itself is unusual. And I understand that in some ways, Albert O is here to replace Tyree Jackson, who's now on the Giants practice squad. But still, 4 tight ends is a number you don't usually see in today's NFL.
Right. 5 if you count Brady Russell on the practice squad.
Right, 5 if you count him.
Right. We take a bigger look at this now, right? It is – look, the way I see it, and I think this is one of the things Howie does that I think separates him from some of the better GMs where you say he's one of the best, right, is that he's shrewd with deals, and not just deals, but he's shrewd with the marketplace and knowing when there's a really good deal to be had, you shouldn't say no. It starts – you can go back to – they had a pretty good backup quarterback a couple of years ago in Joe Flacco. And they sensed an opportunity to go get Gardner Minshew, younger, 2 years left of cost control, a guy who gave you a little bit of mobility and some good accuracy, right? So they went out and they got themselves Gardner Minshew. This past year, you sign Rashad Penny, you bring it back Gainwell and Scott. All of a sudden, the Lions draft Jahmyr Gibbs in the first round, and DeAndre Swift's available, right? So what does Howie do? Picks up the phone, makes a call, gets a good running back, pass-catching talent for a 4th-round pick, which is a good deal. So Albert O, the Eagles know he's a good player. 2 years ago when the Eagles went to Denver and won that game in Jalen Hurts' first year as a starter, Albert O had 3 catches for 77 yards. He was a 4th-round pick out of Missouri who is about 260 pounds but runs really well. I mean, he's sort of like what the Eagles always look for with analytics and testing, and a guy who can do multiple things. He can block, but he can run well and he can catch well. He had 101 yards in last week in the preseason finale, 7 catches. So he, for whatever reason, after a really nice second year, he fell out of favor last year with Nathaniel Hackett, and everyone knows Nathaniel Hackett did a lousy job. So you don't hold that against Albert O. So here he is. He's now available because since his second year, they drafted Dolchik, right, in the second round, a pretty good tight end. They had a pretty good tight end. So he just, for whatever reason, Albert O was now looking at 3rd or 4th on the depth chart, and he's coming up toward the end of his contract. So the Broncos are clearly going to move on. So bam, this is where Howie says, I know this guy's good. He can play. He's better than what we've got out of, say, Tyree Jackson, who we're developing, and probably just as good, actually better than Grant Calcaterra. So why don't I go get him for a 6th-round pick? What was a 6th-round pick? Right, it was nothing. Yeah. So it's just, again, an opportunity that Howie Roseman is really good at bringing in a guy on the cheap who has good potential. And yeah, you let Tyree Jackson go to the Giants because of it. But if you were to compare the upside for Tyree Jackson versus Albert O, who's already been a very good contributor at times and flashed in this league, then there's no comparison. You now have him and Calcaterra to develop behind Dallas Goedert. And
Calcaterra's made some serious steps forward from when he was in college to what he is now. I mean, he was literally not even a blocker in college, and he's now a willing blocker in the NFL. It's a huge jump for a guy like him that was all athlete and no block in college. One more position I want to ask you about before we let you go, Geoff, is obviously no Josh Andrews, no Cameron Tom, but Julian Good-Jones. I'm assuming he is the quote-unquote backup center now for the Eagles, because I don't see a scenario where the Eagles are going to be like, hey, Jason Kelce missed a quarter, so we're going to kick Cam Jurgens in the center all of a sudden in the middle of a game.
Yeah, so as we're talking right now, the Eagles have 3 open spots available on their practice squad, but really 2, because I believe Tim McManus has reported that they're going to be signing a cornerback, Taiwan something. I forget his last name, escapes me at the moment. So they have 2 spots. in my mind, that seems like good 2 spots for Josh Andrews and Nick Morrow. But I am sure as veterans in this league, Josh Andrews and Nick Morrow's agents are trying to find them either more money somewhere else, like some guaranteed money, a practice squad somewhere else. Obviously not a 53 at this point, although you never know. And then if they don't, I would assume those would be the 2 likeliest guys to then come back. And Josh Andrews can be the elevated backup center, and Nick Morrow can be the 4th linebacker, inside linebacker. If not, yeah, you're right. You could move Cam Jurgens, but we do know this. We know that Jeff Stoutland does not like to, in the middle of a game, weaken 2 positions, right? He doesn't like, if Jason Kelce were to get hurt, he doesn't like to play a backup center and then a backup right guard. He'd rather just put 1 backup in.
Right.
So that's why I'm sort of monitoring the situation to see if, whether it's Good Jones or Josh Andrews, if one of those guys is elevated to be the backup center instead of relying on Cam Jurgens to do it. Now, Josh, if Jason Kelce were to get really hurt, right, and he's out 7, 8 weeks or the year, heaven forbid, right, then you could see a scenario where Stoutland says, okay, now we're moving Cam Jurgens to center and we're going to play either Tyler Steen at right guard or somebody else for the full time, because now I don't have to worry about any mid-game movement or anything like that. Then maybe that can see. But in the middle of a game, I don't think they want to have to move 2 backups into starting roles.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Jeff, before I let you go, I got to ask you your reaction to Doug Peterson cutting his son Josh from the Jags.
Cold business, man, huh? Well, the Eagles cut Brady Russell, right, and who is the nephew of their senior advisor, Matt Russell, right, who took over Tom Donahoe's spot after Donahoe left the team. So it can be a very cold business in this world. We know that.
I just would love to have been in that room for that conversation. Like, Doug Peterson calls his son and is like, listen, Josh, I love you, but you're not good enough playing the NFL, man. Like,
it's a great opportunity it's a great opportunity for that reverse discussion where the son sits down and tells Doug, Dad, I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed.
Right. My question is, does Josh Peterson keep trying to play, or does Doug just be like, look, I'm going to give you a quality control job here. Just run around and hang around the team. You'll be a coach one day like me. Like, is that the conversation? Or he's like, no, Dad, I'm going to prove you wrong. I'm going to play in the NFL.
That's a good question. Now, did Josh Peterson get re-signed to the Jags practice squad?
I have to double check that. I have not seen. You know, it's weird, Jeff. And I was talking with Ryan about this off the air, and you'll appreciate this. I was expecting all these practice squads to be announced, like bang, 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 and it's been like a slow trickle out of like practice squads. So it's like, I feel like the Eagles practice squad came down like an hour ago, basically, maybe like 90 minutes ago, whereas like the Washington practice squad was announced at like 2:00. So it's like there's been no consistency today about like these practice squads, because I'm used to there being a little more continuity than this.
Well, I'll tell you one thing that shocks me is that the Eagles actually released their practice squad without it being completely full yet. They are one of the teams that is known for being the last to announce anything, right? And not to think about how long this year we went before they announced their coaching staff. I think it was June, right? It was like forever, even though guys had been out there, the Nickelbacks coach, right? For everything.
The guys were on the field coaching, but they didn't announce it officially until afterward. Like, by the way.
Yeah, Sean Desai didn't have his first press conference. He had been an Eagle for almost a half a year on paper because he signed at the February press conference. So I was shocked that they actually put out 13 of their 16 names.
By the way, I can confirm Josh Peterson is not on the Jags practice squad.
Oh, okay. Well, at least you cannot call Dougie P a nepotist, right?
No, definitely not. I mean, he didn't even give him the practice squad spot. He was like, son, you're not NFL material. I would know. Oh, my gosh. Geoff Mosher, I hope you never have to have that conversation with your daughters. Geoff P. Mosher on Twitter. Follow him there for all the latest on the Eagles. InsideTheBirds.com for all your Eagles coverage. And the next edition of the Inside the Birds podcast drops tomorrow morning on wherever you get your podcasts. Geoff, great stuff today.
Josh, can I interject one thing real quick?
Sure.
Your Thomas Morstead dream has died. He signed with the Jets.
Darn it.
Have a good one, buddy.
Take care, Geoff. I was really hoping for that Thomas Morstead to maybe be an Eagle. But darn it, the Jets finally got around to signing him.